All right, let's dive into something really interesting. What if I told you that the whole idea of environmentalism didn't start in the 20th century? What if it was actually hiding in plain sight, back with the powdered wigs and witty poems of the 1700s?
So, when you hear the word environmentalism, what comes to mind? Probably the 60s, right? The first Earth Day, that whole movement. But what if those big ideas, like stewardship, sustainability, and calling out human wastefulness, were actually bubbling up way, way back, like 300 years ago? It kind of makes you rethink the whole story, doesn't it?
Yup, you heard that right. The 18th century, the so-called Age of Reason, an era all about logic and human brain power, actually has some incredibly surprising things to say about our relationship with nature. Now, they didn't have the word environmentalism back then, but trust me, the seeds of the idea, they were definitely being planted.
Okay, so to really get this, we have to wrap our heads around a key concept they had. It's called the ecology of reason, and it's a wild idea. It's this worldview where human morality and the health of the natural world weren't just connected, they were basically the same thing, two sides of the very same coin.
And the core idea here is just so direct. For these thinkers, it was simple. If your society was morally corrupt, full of greed and pride, then your environment would become corrupted and unhealthy too. It wasn't just that one led to the other. They saw bad morals as the direct cause of a bad landscape.
So where did this idea come from? Well, it was all built on this concept of a perfectly ordered universe, what they called the Great Chain of Being. Picture a ladder, right? Everything from a simple rock at the bottom to an angel at the top had its specific rung, its proper place. And humanity's job? It was to use reason to keep our messy passions in check and just stay on our rung. If you tried to climb higher, to get above your station, that wasn't just being arrogant. Oh no, it was seen as an attack on the whole system, both moral and ecological.
And the poet Alexander Pope, man, he just nailed what they saw as the ultimate sin, pride. He wrote, "In pride and reasoning pride our error lies. All quit their sphere and rush into the skies." He's basically saying our biggest problem is thinking we're smarter than we are, which makes us try to leave our designated spot to rush into the skies. So human arrogance wasn't just a character flaw. It was like the original sin against nature itself.
Which brings us to our first major player here, Alexander Pope. Now, most people know him as the sharpest satirist of his time. But if you look at his work with this new ecological lens, you see something else entirely. You see a kind of environmental watchdog, using his incredible wit as a weapon to defend the natural world.
See, for Pope, when he looked at the over-the-top mansions and gaudy gardens of the newly wealthy, he didn't just see bad taste, he saw a moral crime. All that showing off, all that wasteful spending, he argued it was a moral failure that had real physical consequences. It was a slap in the face to the balance and moderation that nature was supposed to represent.
And he makes this point crystal clear in his writing by setting up this amazing contrast. You've got the villain, Timon, who is all about ego, excess, and dominating nature. His property is totally artificial, a monument to waste. And then you have the hero, the man of Ross, who's the complete opposite. He's humble, he works with the land, and everything he does benefits his community. It's this epic showdown, unsustainable waste versus virtuous stewardship.
This all ties into a really important concept called usufruct, a word Pope was a big fan of. Basically, it means you have the right to use and enjoy something, like land, but, and this is the key part, you have a moral duty not to damage or waste it for future generations. Does that sound familiar? It should. It's basically the 18th century version of sustainability. The original, leave no trace.
And maybe his most famous bit of advice is pure ecological gold. He said, "Consult the genius of the place in all." What he means is, when you're designing something, don't just bulldoze and force your own ideas onto the land. No, first understand the place. Respect its natural spirit, its hills, its streams, its unique character. Work with what's already there. It's a powerful call for cooperating with nature, not trying to conquer it.
But Pope wasn't the only one thinking this way. A poet named James Thomson was right there with him, but he came at it from a totally different angle. If Pope was the satirist, laser-focused on calling out human screw-ups, Thomson was the humble observer, just in awe of nature itself.
Thomson's masterpiece, a long poem called The Seasons, was a real game-changer. See, it wasn't about people strolling through some perfectly manicured garden. No, it was about the huge, sweeping cycles of the entire year. He was all about capturing the raw,
untamed and sometimes straight up terrifying power of the natural world.
And what's so cool is how he looked at nature. He described it with almost scientific detail, explaining things like the water cycle as this huge, functional system. He also saw nature as a source of the sublime. You know that feeling you get when you see something so massive and powerful it makes you feel both amazed and a little bit scared? That's the sublime. And by showing that, he was constantly reminding people, hey, we're actually pretty small in the grand scheme of things.
So all these detailed descriptions, they weren't just for show. They weren't just pretty words. By explaining so carefully how nature actually works, Thomson was making a really profound point. This celebration of a functional system, well, that in itself is a deeply ecological act.
Okay, so why are we talking about 300-year-old poetry? Why does any of this matter now? Because these ideas, they never went away. In fact, you could say they built the foundation for how we think about our own environmental challenges today.
You can actually trace a direct line. Back then, in the neoclassical era, a damaged environment was a sign of a moral problem. Then came the Romantics, who saw it as a spiritual problem, that we'd lost our connection to nature. And now, we call it an ecological crisis. The labels change, but the core issue, it's always been about our broken relationship with the world around us.
Yeah, the words we use are different, but the fundamental message is exactly the same. The warning against human arrogance, the call for living in balance, the need for responsible stewardship, these are the exact same themes Pope and Thomson were writing about. I mean, think about it. Pope's attack on wasteful luxury sounds an awful lot like a modern critique of consumerism, right?
And that leaves us with one last big question. If we take that 18th century idea seriously, the idea that the health of our planet is a direct mirror of our own moral health, then we have to ask ourselves a pretty tough question. What does the state of our world today really say about us?